And I will tell you once the stream is going, and then you'll be able to.
Hello to everyone who may be watching, and hello to my colleagues and friends here on the screen. Welcome to the first of our planning sessions for. Hello to everyone who may be watching, and hello to my colleagues and friends here. I'm hearing it from my other ear is hearing this. I apologize. Welcome to the craziness. This is the first of our planning sessions for developing resource partners for creating the future. And hopefully you've read a little bit of why we're here today, and we'll be talking a little bit about that as we go along, but have a sense of what we mean by resource partners. And I just want to welcome everyone. If you are watching and would like to participate by tweeting, use the hashtag creating the future and smush it all together, creating the future with the hashtag at Twitter, because that's the only place we're going to be looking, because otherwise we're going to be diving into the meeting here. I am Hildy Gottlieb with Creating the Future, and I thought maybe we would go around and just do a quick who are you and where are you buzzing in from, and then we'll start with awesomes and dive into the stuff. So I am beaming in from Tucson, Arizona, where we have a little bit of coolness. It's feeling like springish sort of weather, and it's pretending to drizzle. And I'll also warn everyone that if you suddenly hear loud crashing sounds from our neck of the woods, it is our neck of the woods. We have workers completely replacing all the ductwork in the house and pounding on the ceiling, and unless they come crashing through, we're just going to keep going. So, Rebecca, would you introduce yourself? And
Rebecca Hurd. I'm beaming in from the small mountain town McCall in the state of Idaho, US. And we are in the middle of a snow globe for the next 4 days, which is very normal for where we live.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Anne?
I'm Anne Vermill, and I'm from living in Fresno, California, where the air is sliceable with a knife today because it's so bad. And we are starting the next year of drought here, so it's a little ragged in this agricultural valley right now.
Dicey.
Yeah.
Wow. Laura Steffen.
Hi, I am currently in Portland, Oregon.
Wonderful. And what's your weather like?
It looks to be clouding over, and it's in the 40s, so a little chillier than we've had, but good.
Okay. And Shiva?
Hi, I'm Shiva Berman. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's mostly sunny today, and there's a woodpecker that has decided that the side of the house is just the place to pick. So if you hear knocking, that's what it is.
I love it. I would much rather have your kind of knocking than the guy we're having. And Dimitri?
I am Dimitri Petropoulos. I'm with Creating the Future, and I too am in Tucson, Arizona, where the weather is exactly the way Hildy described it.
Out the very same window.
Out the very same window. Coincidentally, it is the exact same weather. So.
Well, I am very, very, very glad that you are here, everyone. And again, if you're watching us at the blog and want to tweet, tell us where you are and tell us what the weather's like. And we're going to go around and start our meeting the way we always start our meetings. Meetings at Creating the Future always start by touching base as humans rather than as machines that are here to get some work done and move on. So we're going to start by connecting with each other and asking what has been awesome in everybody's lives since we last saw you. And let's do sort of a speedy awesome today rather than the long, windy awesomes. But what's been awesome with you guys?
I'll go. I read a blog post this morning by Janine Roth, and she was describing bunch of things, but she described how she was out to dinner with this is a long time ago, boyfriend, and they were having a fight in a restaurant. And he looked at her and he said, let's think about celebration as an account from which we can draw funds. And so can we put aside this fight and draw from our celebration savings so we can enjoy our evening together, and then we will replenish our celebration fund later. And I just thought, wow, what a great way to be present in a moment when you want to throttle someone. And, you know, they were in a super fancy restaurant and he wanted to have a good time. So I thought that was a pretty awesome way to divert that.
Wow. Yeah, and it does certainly remind us that we can pivot at any moment. We don't have to react, we can create. Wow, I love that. I love that. Who else has something awesome going on?
Well, I noted that it's snowing, which we very much love. This next 4 days of a snowstorm are also timed perfectly with, we're in the construction business. So during the downtime of when everyone else wants stuff built is when you could do your own construction project for your family. So we are restarting from the fall an addition on our home, which will give more space for all of our family and friends to be. So on one hand, I said, yes, I love snow, but on the other hand, I'm saying, really? Because it's been rather mild here for a couple weeks in McCall, and wait 5 minutes, it'll change. So excitement is that we're having our project go forward, and seeing my husband and his friend out on the ladders in the snowstorm earlier today. So the banging has stopped for the meeting, so that's good.
Excellent. Wow, this is very exciting on many, many counts. Mostly because we were counting the moments until your addition is finished at your house, because we're all in line to come play.
So my awesome has to do with Valentine's Day. Today was Valentine's Day, as you all know. And my husband and I were able to actually take some time and go have breakfast together. Like, how lovely can it be to just do that? Just sit across the table from the person you care deeply about, and, you know, and just chat, not have to be solving problems, not have to be, you know, dealing with issues, just looking in each other's eyes and enjoying the company and taking the time. So that was awesome.
Wow. And after how many years of marriage?
33 years.
Oh,
that's awesome.
It sounds like you were drawing out of that happiness account that Laura was talking about there.
No kidding.
Fortunate to be able to do that. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. What else is awesome with you guys?
I'm going to a concert tonight, and it's the pianist Yefim Bronfman, who is right up there at the top of the list. And I'm so excited because you don't get a great artist like that in Fresno very often. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And the other awesome is the way that catalytic thinking has helped me really finally break through figuring out what the next stage of exciting enterprise will be for me. And it's been hard to do, but it happened when my friend Frank said his macular degeneration had gotten so bad he couldn't read anymore. And I said, well, I will read the new translation of the Odyssey to you. And 5 people said, let's do a reader's theater and you can help us. And I said, that's it. That's what I must do.
Wow.
So I am now cutting the first 3 books of the Odyssey for readers theater.
Wow, that's very cool.
Isn't it fun?
Oh, it's awesome.
That's very cool. It hits so many wonderful notes in and of itself, in and of Anne Vermel is doing it, in and of many of those. It's like, wow, it's perfect. It's perfect, Anne.
Oh. And how about you, Dimitri? What is awesome with you?
Well, I have two awesomes. And within the first awesome, there's 2, which is both. I got word last night. One of my youngest called and he said, we're going to come out next weekend, and we want to come out and visit mom, and So just letting you know that we're going to be there. So they haven't been here in about 2 years, certainly not together. So they're coming out as a birthday surprise, not surprise because she knows, but as a birthday present to Diane. So we'll at least get to spend a little time together. So that's incredible, awesome. Then another awesome is that there is a lecture series that goes on at the University of Arizona in the spring, and it's usually around some topic. And this year it's on humans and computation and machines, which is already super geeky, which, sign me up. I'm already in on that. And on Monday night, they had a lecture, and they had the guy, very young guy initially from Carnegie Mellon, who invented the CAPTCHAs, when you have to, match the letters and all that to prove that you're a human and whatnot. And he had an hour lecture that was the funniest, the most fascinating, the most interesting thing. His current project is Duolingo. And he talked a lot about learning languages online. And at another point, I'll get into more detail because this is a quick one, but having to do with the cultural impact of making learning democratized and easy to get. And it was inspirational and fun. And so that was definitely a geek awesome for me.
Wow. I have two awesomes as well. One is the banging on the roof, which we are blessed with a next door neighbor who I keep describing as a heating and cooling whisperer. He understands at a sort of a MacGyver sort of level how things work and why things aren't working. And we actually feel very lucky that our air conditioning unit died at the end of last summer. We keep looking at each other and going, that was such a gift that it died. And Bob has been in there finding everything that was done wrong 20, 30 years ago and pulled out all of that. It's just, I can't even start to tell you how much is going on. But one of the most fun parts of all of that, in addition to the fact that our heating and cooling will finally work the way it's supposed to, I've lived in this house for 22 years, going on 22 years. There's parts of the house that have never had heating and cooling. And I just always figured that's the way it is. And yeah, so this is going to be fun. But the real joy is that he's got a young man working with him as sort of an apprentice, and watching him teach and watching that literally every single thing they have done for the past 2 days, all you hear is this patter of Bob saying, and now what we're going to do is, and now I'm doing this, and here's how I'm doing that. Now hold it this way. Now, when you mark it like that, now what I'm going to do, okay, the next thing we're going to do, and it is a constant teaching. And this is the first time this young man has ever been doing heating and cooling, and he is drinking it up. I asked him, had him separately for a little while, and asked him, how he likes it. He's been doing it for 6 months. How does he like it? And he said, I'm learning so much. And so that has just been such a joy to watch that interaction of, so that's the patience, because, this is an old house and stuff's not going the way it's supposed to. Creating the future, we talk a lot about there are no shoulds. Just think about life as an old house. There's no shoulds. Nothing goes the way it's supposed to. And just the patience with which Bob is addressing all of that and continually teaching. Okay, you see that? That's why this is, it's really pretty special to be part of. And you hear it echoing throughout the house because it's through all the ductwork. So...
I will add to that Bob sought this young man out, found it, and said, do you want to learn this? And he had nothing to do with this at all. He worked like in an auto detail shop or something. So the fact that he would pick an apprentice and begin teaching him basically life skills, because a lot of this stuff it's not what the book says you're supposed to do. It's the logic of the situation. And how can you apply your skills to that? It's
really been pretty wonderful. And then the other awesome is the amazing stuff going on at Creating the Future. Everything is on fire in a good way. It is just We are starting, I'll just share one that has been pretty consuming around here. We are starting a beta test of a new way of teaching, a lighter version of our immersion courses for people who don't have either the time or the resources to take the deep dive in that all of you guys have been in immersion. You know, it's intensive. There's a lot of commitment, and a lot of people don't have either the resources or the time to commit to that. And we have been inviting people to that beta, and the responses that we're getting, the reinforcement of the difference in promoting something versus inviting people to it. The response when you get a no response is beautiful and connected, and I'm so glad you wrote, and we're going to have one heck of a time and already learning so much. The class hasn't started yet. We are still registering, and we're already learning. So I'm just very, very excited about all of that. So that's what's been awesome. And it may sprinkle here, and that's always awesome in the desert. So, well, let's get started on the work at hand. To give folks background, if you are tuning in here, and I'm keeping an eye on the tweet stream, if you're tuning in, we started last week. We've been starting in preparation and background and grounding for about a year to get ready for this. And Rebecca and Anne and I mostly have been working very, very closely under Anne's wonderful guidance. Pulling things together and asking some of the key questions that have to be asked before you're even ready to start asking other questions. Last week, 2 weeks ago, all of us got together to really just ground ourselves in what is this process? And that's an important piece that many people, again, many groups, when they get together, they just dive in and do the work and assume that everybody's going to get on board somehow. And so we grounded ourselves in that and in what the future of creating the future is. And you will find at the blog a link to that if you're interested, so you can go back and see it as well. We're going to be following catalytic thinking to create this plan. And this, as the first in the planning session, will start by just noting that this is walking the talk of our mission in action. And the joy of being at Creating the Future is that it's not just, here's the stuff we have to do to accomplish our mission. We accomplish our mission by being the mission while we're doing the work to accomplish our mission. We live in the world of meta. And so the mission at Creating the Future is systems change. And the systems change so that every system we encounter day to day, whether that's community systems or workplace systems, or how we talk to each other at the dinner table, and Laura, your celebration is the perfect example of a system, that all of those systems are bringing out the best in us. And so many of the systems we encounter in our day-to-day are really aimed at reacting to what could go wrong and reacting to what could be, how we have to suspect each other. And Creating the Future is all about systems change so that the questions embedded in the systems we encounter every day are bringing out the very, very best in us. And so we're going to follow catalytic thinking, the framework, the set of practices that helps guide bringing out the best in us. We're going to follow that throughout this next several planning sessions. And so I thought it would be helpful to start by grounding everybody in what is catalytic thinking. And what you'll see on the screen here is sort of the flow. It's an iterative flow because while catalytic thinking follows causality, and causality is linear, humans are not linear. So sometimes we may think of something way down the line and say, oh, wow, we should have put something back in there. We should have asked that earlier on. Okay, we're going to go back and we're going to ask it again, but we're going to then follow that flow of causality. And you'll notice that once a situation presents itself, this little red box over on the left-hand side, once a situation presents itself, where we normally go is to just react to that situation. So it could be, we want to find partners for creating the future. And the immediate response is, okay, what will we do to find partners? In catalytic thinking, the first thing we do is we listen. We practice listening, and we're listening catalytically for what do we want? What are the outcomes? What do we have to build on? What are the strengths? And what is important to us? What are our values as we march in to identify, okay, what is the highest potential? What is the highest potential outcome of this endeavor? If we were 100% successful, what would be different and for whom? You notice this little up in the corner here, and for whom? Because if we understand causality, we know that causality affects a lot of other people aside from who you think the one person is or the one group that's going to be affected. Causality affects a whole lot of other people anyway. We might as well identify what results we want for them. And we're going to reach for that high potential outcome and then work backwards to create the conditions for success. The actions which you see in green here towards the bottom, the actions will actually just sort of tell us what they are as we create that ladder of causality towards the high potential outcome. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to start by listening, because everything starts with listening. As we move along, we're going to keep listening because we never stop listening. It's embedded in everything. And I am going to read from the blog post so that those of you who are watching, you may not have read the blog post, and I'm going to read exactly what we're going to be doing today. We will begin where we always begin, listening. We will consider all the things that people think about what it means to be a partner, about traditional funding, and about resources. We will listen to our experience, to the conversations we've all been part of. What are people telling us is wrong, and what would good look like? What are the values at the core of that? What are the strengths in the people and systems that exist upon which we can build these partnerships? This is where we get to pivot from reacting to how it's always been done, what has gone wrong in the past, what could go wrong in the future, what we should do, and we get to pivot to creating what's possible. We will listen to ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves about how we've done it in the past. And we'll be mindful of the lens we're seeing through, mindfully noting the expectations and shoulds that we all bring to every conversation because we're humans and that's what we do. Just as we would listen to a friend or colleague, and just as we would want that friend to listen to us, we will then reframe and pivot to what is possible through the lens of outcomes and strengths and values, the lens of catalytic listening. So let us begin. And if any of you have questions that, I'm not the queen of questions. I'll start the ball rolling, but if questions occur to you guys, you are all practiced in catalytic listening and catalytic thinking. So dive in and ask questions that are listening questions. But when we think about, if somebody says, we're looking for partners, what is the stuff that occurs to you? What have you experienced in the past when people are looking for funding partners? What does that bring up? What are they really saying? What's your experience been?
Very transactional in nature.
Talk more.
Because it can often be, even if a community benefit organization wants to find a partner, whether it's money or some other resource, it's purely focused on the thing we want. Like that community benefit organization has folding tables, a van. None of it is really about nurturing a relationship to see what we have together, is often the way it plays out. And it's very much, they have something that I need. So I may need to make a call to talk to someone, and not really thinking, I don't even know who, organizations aren't people as we know, yet it's saying that organization has something we need. So it's much more, what do you have that I want? And maybe I'll trade you something down the road if you're nice.
If I can add to that, I think, the majority of time, I don't even hear the word partner. I hear donor. And when you put people in the position of being a donor, you're automatically keeping them at an arm's length. And that's the least distance. Usually it's not much longer than that. And some organizations have started using the word partner, but they don't really think of it as true partnership. Because while they're happy to use your resources and your funding and all of that, they're not, in many cases, they're not really interested in what you can contribute in the way of vision, in the way of culture, in the way of, a future. What they want is the future that they have in mind, the vision that they have in mind, and how can you contribute to this, as opposed to how can I truly be your partner just as you are mine. So it's a one-way kind of a interaction.
Yeah, I would add to, I would piggyback that by saying it's very rare that you see a partnership take shape where they understand going in that together they're creating something that is new, that is the partnership. It is not my agenda and your agenda. It's what we're going to do together. And that may be very different, and it could is a lot more interesting, actually.
Yeah, I would almost, piggybacking on both of what you guys are saying, I would almost say that it is it is even more adamant than that. It's not we're not looking for a partnership that where you're going to share your wisdom. It's, we don't want your wisdom because we know what we're doing. And don't tell us what to do. Just give us the money and let us do what we know. Yeah. There's I mean, there's an adamancy, yeah.
That leads to a very interesting thing. A retailer friend of mine used to say that when he was sort of strange, he'd say, you get a partner, you got a boss. And I thought, and that's really true in the donor recipient situation.
Wow.
I think it's that notion of clarifying expectations. And a lot of that clarity is not there in the traditional sense.
More about that.
Well, picking up on what Anne said, I absolutely agree that in a lot of organizations, they're completely afraid that the donor would dictate what they want you to do. I'm giving you this amount of money. This is what I want you to deliver for that, or this is where I want you to go. And organizations are very guarded against something like that. Even if that donor is a member of the board. They're very guarded against something like that. I think there is a lot of communication that does not happen when you're bringing in a partner. What is it that we want from this partnership? What is that common vision? What is the common goal? How are we each going to be a part of this? And what are the expectations we can have of each other? If you give me the money, and what do you expect of me? And what are my limitations? How far can I go? How far can you go? So there's a lot of definitions that don't get put in place, and people just don't take the time, or they just assume that you should know. You should know better. You're going to give me the money, but that doesn't mean you're going to tell me what to do.
And that really gets back to when Rebecca started out by saying that it's very transactional. I've seen it in both ways. I know of one particular organization that's coming to my mind immediately that does nothing but raise money. They started as, this was many, many years ago, they started as the wives of wealthy individuals, wealthy men, because that's the only people who had money was wealthy men. They raised lots and lots of money. And their requirement, they once a year, and the hoops that they required organizations to jump through, because we've got the money and we're going to give you a lot of money. And then they required that for the duration of the project, these were all capital projects, for the duration of the project, that they had a seat on the board. And that they were then going to tell, because they had been on many, many boards, because they were the wealthy wives, they were then going to tell you what to do. And so I've seen both of those expectations, and they're both, as you said, Rebecca, very transactional, rooted in, I've got the money, you're going to do what I want you to do, and you're going to do it my way because I'm smarter, because I've got the money. And I've seen just the opposite of that Shiva and Ann, you guys were talking about, is no, we know what we're doing, and we really don't want you telling us what to do. And all of that's rooted in that transaction.
Yeah, I have seen organizations actually say, switch the language to, you're going to partner with us. And then there's a frantic flurry in the development office of trying to figure out how to do some activity that will make the donor feel as though he's a partner. And it's totally phony and totally ersatz, but it also it goes right back to what Shiva said in the very beginning. The basic questions are not asked. And as you were talking, I was thinking, yes, if I had asked those questions of my fiance when I was getting married, I might not have married him. He might not have married me. The answer would have been so revealing. So.
Well, and what you said reminds me of a community benefit organization I worked at, which was like many others, and your money gave you access. So it was this membership benefits model. And the more money you gave, and it was named tiered levels, often they're like stone colors or types or whatever it is, yet it was a yes and. And if you come to this level, you'll also get to meet behind the scenes for a special tour. And the only people who got that were the people who paid that much money and got all that type of recognition and access. Whereas you would have people, where are the people in the community who might be showing up and working on stuff that doesn't get dollar valued? So they're, the the volunteers who make amazing things happen for the organization, far beyond probably what someone's check was.
I am remembering, and Anne, I know that you vividly remember this. I believe it was the opera in Fresno. I am almost positive it was the opera. You had a delightful young man, hugely energetic, leading it. And what they did for, I hadn't remembered this in years, what they did for their major donors was they invited them to an event, and the donors and the singers all were on the stage together. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anne. And the singers would sing a performance standing next to the donors. I'm getting chills like thinking about this. Would sing, and they'd be on the stage, and they'd see what the singers would see when they're out on the stage. And the way this was described is, and then they just open their checkbooks. And I'm thinking of what the power of that would be for regular humans, and not just for, oh, you've got a lot of money. But it was, am I getting that right, Anne?
Yeah, you've got it right. Yeah, that's exactly the way it worked. That particular young man was extremely creative in ways to engage his donors. He gave them experiences, but it was always pay as you go.
Yes. And I what Rebecca's saying, yeah.
So.
The other thing that it makes me think about is the value of the partnership component. I mean, let me talk about transaction for a second. The value of that transaction to both parties and what it really means to them. So if I am a person of great means, $5,000, Elon Musk put a $100,000 car on a rocket and shot it off into space. And, it's like sofa change, I mean, yes, it's a lot of money, but to him, it didn't really matter. And to others, it's their life savings, and it is their entire life. So how do you think about that in terms of the level of engagement and what you're doing? And I know we've often talked about that the person who sent the $5 check, that may be such a big thing for them to do that. It may be almost a hardship maybe for them to do that. Mm-hmm. And yet the level of engagement that occurs with that person is, we just got $5, move along. And then the person who so anyways, there's a component there of valuing the person and really looking at where this is coming from in a way that isn't tied to the economic contribution. And I think that that's really
for a minute.
What, Anne?
Let's be fair to the development officers for a minute, because I've worked in a number of development offices, and the one that I started in was run by a man who really understood exactly what you're saying about the $5 donor. And I remember seeing him take one of the secretaries who was putting aside a check for $2.36. And he picked it up and he showed her, he said, look at this handwriting. This is an old person's handwriting. This person is sending us what's left after the Social Security check came through. So don't send them that letter, send them the major donor letter. Yeah. And after that, I carried that with me everywhere I went. I know everyone who ever worked for that man did. And I suspect there are a number of people out there who would recognize that the power of what Ron Eichmann did with that opera company could also be translated into his educational program. Right. And so there's value there. I think what I'm going round about it too, but I think what we're saying is that a lot of what we've done in the fundraising world has merit to transfer into the partnership, but we have to go back to Shiva's questions and start there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking, Anne, of that one gentleman is when that, unless it becomes part of an institution's cultural systems of this is how we be, it leaves with that person. So there are many amazing humans who are honoring humans in this world who maybe are feeling often that they're going against the system because they're told you don't have time for that, yet they still go meet and have coffee with all of these just X dollar donations. Yet until it really becomes the way of being in an institution, then it's gone when those people left. Whatever happened to how I used to get coffee? I must not matter anymore, without maybe knowing that Sarah's now moved on.
So that should be another bucket item. Yeah.
I also think that there is something to be said about, when you delegate people to a certain role, you're actually cutting back on the potential that's there, right? So if you just say to somebody, you are great at this, so this is what I want you to do, without taking the time to getting to know them and understanding, who they are as a human being and what is it that they could bring to a partnership, you are diminishing that potential. So putting people in a donor bucket or this bucket or that bucket, you really, you're cutting back on all the opportunities that could be there for true partnership, which means we're going to be in this hand in hand together for a long time and, pull each other and encourage each other and just move forward. And you give me all you can and I give it all I can. Right. So I think we have to be very careful as to how we define that partnership, making sure that we leave the door open for all kinds of potentialities, not just financial, not just political, not just this, but all kinds of potentialities. People are capable of so much more and are willing to give so much more. If they only knew, that it would also move their goals forward.
I think that makes me think about the importance of starting the partnership with by modeling the curiosity to the potential partner. So what is our responsibility? And as they learn the culture and get excited about it, that they model it, that they do it back to us to say, So it could be the questions that we continue to ask over and over is, how would you like to be stretched in this relationship? What are the things you want to get better at? What are the things you want to learn in partnership? And so if we model that, we ask that on a continuum, that we expect that the answers will change constantly, it will show them that we're in for a much different ride than the usual. I'm asking you for your money and I want to give it to you and do as little work as possible,
and we'll call that a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll write on our donor list, we'll call them partners.
Mm-hmm.
And Laura, I hear you, and I absolutely agree with you. I think it's the notion of fulfilling. What kind of a partnership is fulfilling for people?
And that first,
Go, Rebecca.
no, you go.
I think there's all different levels. And I think that's what that touches upon, Laura, that there's all different ways. The person with the scrawled check that you were talking about, and that may be the way they participate. I mean, that may be their partnership in terms of feeling like they are a partner in what's happening, up to and including amazing ideas and energy and resource and whatnot, and the full gamut, being open to all of that. So I absolutely agree that I think that is a critical component to change. There's also something else said here that I just wanted to touch upon, and that is the two-way nature of what you were talking about, Laura, that it changes the organization at the same time as it changes the person. And it's sort of the nature of being an experiment that we've talked about and beta testing things and whatever, is that you take this class and it makes the class better. It isn't that you bought the can of Coke and it's exactly like the next can of Coke and the next can of Coke. It made no difference that you bought that can of Coke to the Coke. And here it makes a massive difference. And that's what I'm thinking about, that the two-way exchange of information, of resource, of creativity, of energy, all of that each affects the other and makes the other better.
I am loving the first, I'll just say that my brain has just like, we're barely into it and my brain's exploded. We really do very, very narrowly define, here's what your role is here, and here's what your role is. And your role is to give us money, and our role is to do the work. And, or vice versa, our role is to give you money, and your role is to give us a report and to follow these. And what you sparked for me, Dimitri, is having the open conversation that Laura's talking about of what excites you, what interests you. Here's the kinds of stuff that we're doing. What sparks for you? The way, Laura, that you came into this group and that you offered your brilliance in helping us create systems and databases and protocols was by our saying, sit in the room and see what interests you. And if something sparks that you love, that we don't give donors and by defining them as donors and funders, and we don't give them the opportunity in any way to share any of who they are in any other way. And then we get into questions like, and I have been on post boards for 20 years about running nonprofits, and it's always very steeped in that language of nonprofit. Is it okay to ask your donors to volunteer? Is it okay to ask your volunteers for money? It's like, okay, we've got you in a box here, and you're in that box, and but is it okay to ask what you love doing? I mean, it's like how you love being with others. What is, I'm scribbling down all the questions that you guys are coming. I loved, Laura, describe a partnership that was fulfilling to you. What did that look like?
I also keep thinking of this in a way of community. I mean, really, truly in my mind, you're not building partnerships, you're building a community where every person has a stake at, the future of this community. And so as you were saying that, Hildy, the vision that came to my mind is, if you have a community of people in a neighborhood and you tell them, you just stay in your house, don't ever come out. Because we don't want to see any other part of you. We just, you're good. Just stay in your house.
Okay, so given what's been going on at our house, and that it is our next door neighbor who is doing the work, they moved in 10, 15 years or so ago, and Bob runs the heating and cooling business out of his house. And the stuff's in his backyard, but you'd never really know about it. The truck's in his lot. The neighbor on the other side of me came over one day when they first moved in and said, you could call the city on him. And I said, for what? Now, in my former life, when I was married, we were in a contracting business out of the house. It's like, okay. But she said, when we were first married, somebody called the city on us because we were doing contracting. And so if you want, you can call the city on them. And that's exactly what you just said, Shiva. She wants to sit in her house. And we've got this amazing guy watching him teach somebody else. Yeah, I mean, and so that's community, and I love what you just said.
The other thing I'm thinking is, so speaking of conditions that need to be in place, right? So when you think about people wanting to come out of their homes and wanting to build this community together, what is it they need to come out of their home? In this particular case, as you're talking about, it sounds like, courage is a big part of it. Have the courage to come out and walk in the street and knock on people's doors.
What I play with is the fact that how our social interactions mirror the world around us. And by that, I mean, our society went from feudal to farming to post-industrial to industrial and our social interactions followed those and mirrored those ways of relating in many ways. So we're talking about a very sort of industrial way of relating to each other and seeing each other in a very narrow, you attach the bumper. That's what
we are means of production.
A means of production. And also very tied to money, as opposed to the worth of and when you talk, Shiva, about community, you think about, in other times and communities, there were roles played by the grandparents that are now monetized, and it's the Acme babysitting service, or it's the, so it has become a service that no longer is just part of being family, just part of, having a sense of community or love or whatever. And it really is interesting how it follows the way we interact in the world is how we interact in a social way. And then we reach a point, I think, where we don't think that there's any other way of doing it, because that's all we have been doing for such a long time. All life must be handled through monetary transaction. All social interaction must be through monetary transaction. And I think there's huge opportunity there to change that.
I am struck. What I found my pen writing when you were talking, Shiva, about the conditions and talking about courage was my pen wrote, instead of partnership, relationship. And I frequently, as a writer, I know what I'm thinking when it comes out of the pen. So, and being in relationship takes courage. Being in real relationship takes courage. It looks like Sergio is going to be joining us, and we will welcome him when he is all plugged in there. Tell us when you can hear us, Sergio. Not yet. But that whole piece about, you know, Shiva, you were talking about, it's not really building partnerships, we're building community. What does it take to have the courage to come out of your house? That is really the courage of relationship. It's scary. It's scary because if I knock on their door and say hello, there's 9 million things that could happen, and it's way easier for me to stay in my house. Sergio, can you hear us?
Yes, perfect. Can you all hear me as well?
We can indeed. We can indeed. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
It's my super pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for Hilde for giving me this opportunity, and Rebecca, I just caught up on some video and what the project has entailed and all the work and all this time and all this advancement is a huge inspiration as well, and your generosity, which in most cases people are blocking everybody with all this abundance that we have. Everybody's operating with the mindset of scarcity. And I see where you're working, and I think it's admirable, and I think it's pivotal. It's a pivot to a new society which is coming anyways. The tools are finally here, like the internet and social media and these new tools of communication. You know, I would imagine if we were doing smoke signals, this would be real hard. So thank you, and it's a pleasure, and I'm here to help. Thank you. I hope I'm pretty excited. It's 2 years now, right? 2.5 years that I think I connected it first time.
It may be, yeah. Let me introduce Sergio to you guys a little bit and bring you up to speed, Sergio. And what we're asking is that everybody mute when they're not talking. There we go. Sergio did connect a while back, seeing some of what we were doing, and the more we talked about the kinds of things we were doing, initially with the restructuring, which did begin almost 3 years ago, Sergio got more and more excited about the work that we're doing, wanting to plug in wherever we could. And so, Sergio, tell us where you are beaming in from, what part of the world, and what the weather is like.
It's just beautiful Buenos Aires this time of year. It's the summer, but it's sort of like the first spring. Climate is really getting wacky down here. It's changed a lot. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful day. It's a great walking city. I'm a little in between destinations, so I ended up at some cafe. And the architecture and just the mix of cultural events and shows. It's a very dynamic city, tango, and the nightlife. And I came down for 2 months in 2004. So, yay.
That's a long 2 months. A long 2 months. Well,
it's a long 2 months. Yeah, it's a long 2 months.
We are very, very glad you're here. We have been talking about the question of when we talk about partnerships, starting through catalytic listening and really just listening to see what are the stories we tell ourselves when we talk about partnerships in organizations. What are the stories that we tell ourselves? And we have been talking a lot about, and I'll ask you guys to chime in a little bit, but we've been talking a little bit about the transactional norm of many of those relationships, the push and pull based on the wealthy donor versus the poor organization and who gets to do what and what we expect from each other. We've been talking a lot about the kinds of questions that would be preconditioned to having more equal footing in terms of partnerships where we're valuing each other as humans. And what we've been talking a little bit about is the courage that it takes to be in partnerships and relationships that are not the norm, because transactional allows us to stay in our boxes. Any other things that you guys would note that we have been that are highlights so far of what we've been talking about to bring Sergio up to speed. You're muted, Sergio.
Am I on now?
You're on now, yeah.
Okay, super. Thank you. From what I've seen, there's also what I was listening to Rebecca speak was the idea of the system, that the change is the system and the methodology or the model that makes us, or at least gives us the ability to automate and simplify and improve that mechanics of exchange. I thought the approach from the donor aspect, because sort of these same things are happening in the commercial area. I mean, it's just amazing. The idea from my end was put a little bit more focus on social aspects in the commercial organization that has more commercial efficiency. So I see all those elements, people articulating from power and control instead of knowledge and understanding. So it's definitely like one of the things that we've been addressing on the language front or model side is like a meta language, where we start really finessing what we talk about, like the structural language, the structure, and the language itself and what it is we're talking about. This is sort of a complex semantic and semiotic nature, just like, hey, we're going to address how we address things. I find it's relatively complex and needs a certain agent to be able to, a certain mental framework to be able to incorporate these concepts.
Yeah, what that's raising for me is the language is just huge. It's interesting. The language piece is huge in the traditional fundraising world, where the potential people, the people who we want to partner with, are frequently going to be in that world. And the language embedded in that world is so, it's dehumanizing, is probably the nicest thing that I can say about it. There's acronyms, and Anne, you possibly know them better than I. There's acronyms for within the fundraising world. The one that always comes to my mind is LIBUNT, which is you gave last year but not this year. And people talk about other humans like that.
What about low-hanging fruit?
Low-hanging fruits. I like that. I like that.
I'm thinking that, well, whatever I was thinking, it was brilliant, but it's gone. I'm concerned about that aspect of things, because it's so human to distance ourselves from other human beings. That's the process that we put there. It's what you say about the war on drugs. It's not about the war on drugs. It's about people. And the same thing is holding true here. We're not talking about a LIBOT. We're talking about Susan Smith, who is unable to give this year, but was able to give last year. She's got cancer, you know, and so.
Right. Yeah.
So that makes me think also what Sergio was saying about addressing how we're going to address things in creating that relationship is kind of putting our stake in the ground to say we are creating relationship as a radical act. You know, we're saying that we are going to reject that idea of power to say, like, I have the money, therefore I have the power. Like, we're going to refuse that, and we're going to actively voice that we are refusing that. And by doing that, it seems like it would then, well, if the people want to play that way, they will open up. There will be a flowering. We'll give them the courage to step forward and say yes, instead of finagling, their angle, their lever.
Wow, we are creating relationship as a radical act. I love it, Laura.
It's making me think, we've talked, and it's been mentioned again, about having that manifesto publicly on our site, and in many forms of conversation. It comes up when people spend time with us, yet when people show up and like, what is this creating the future? This is what you will see from us in everything we are and how we be. And to note, there is not the hidden agenda. It really is. I want to spend 2 hours with you. And if we get to know each other, mission is accomplished. That's what I wrote down. I'm getting to know Sergio today. That's what I have. So, and very publicly stating it and acknowledging all the systems that we have been showing up with deep compassion to see there is a different way of being. And maybe we haven't considered it before because we came into the job. This was my new hire orientation. I was told to code people by fields, so clocking away.
When I used to teach, when I wrote friend raising 100 years ago, and I was doing workshops on friend raising, and I would start out by saying, there is no so that in friend raising. We're not making friends so that we can then put our hand in their pocket. That friendship doesn't have a so that. And people would get into groups and they would be brainstorming, and they would the stuff that would be coming out in these beautiful humans talking about the joy that they have in building relationships with other humans. And at the end of the workshop, I would say, okay, let's pause for some reflection, look back over your notes, just like we do now, even back then. And I would ask for reflection. And somebody invariably would say, I get all this friend raising stuff. When do we ask them for money? and I'm thinking of that as you're talking, Rebecca. I get all of this. Okay, I get this relationship stuff. It's been 2 hours. Fork it up. But I'm really coming back to the language thing. I think that there is I think recreating the lexicon.
Sergio, I am trying to unmute you and I have not been able to. So I know you were saying something, and if you could do it on your end, you can add your comment.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm coming through. I'm a little. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, there's when I look at it, I've been building online for 20 years, and these new tools permit a different type of communication than, say, it was the smoke signal, a letter. My father remembers down here in Argentina when the boat would take, by the time it went back and came back, it would take 30 days. So you wanted to minimize the risk in the transaction. You wanted the frequency and the velocity of liberalism was clear, and that it paved the way to well-being. There really was no good communication. But now, when social media and how the tools transform for me and how it's transforming people and how it's transforming the organization, our ability to have all this call 10 years ago would cost like thousands of dollars just to have this technology. And here we are, and there's a possibility for new bandwidth, and we can, I think, construct a new narrative. That's why I agree wholeheartedly with what's going on and the direction where you guys are working on. I think from the monetization aspect, I think we can put together some products. I've been working some things in parallel, which when you're ready, I would like to present. But basically, I think we can monetize through actual participation in helping people resolve their problems and creating value in those circuits, and connect in the commercial space with the commercial language, and the ONG space with the ONG or the NGO language, and then basically have those different abilities to both finance and grow what we're doing.
You want to switch places with me for a second? I'm gonna grab that.
No,
I want the code that's on your screen.
Oh, okay.
So I want to grab.
I know what it was.
Okay. Cody's machine crash. I just sent a note to everybody.
Okay. Sergio, everything you shared will be something that we'd say, tell us more. Let's have coffee, with you down in Buenos Aires, and we'd love to to hear more about spaces you're playing in and what excites you the most, because that's what being in relationship is about. So.
Yeah, I am off the screen as my screen comes back on, but I'm on the mic, and I'm loving the I'm loving the thought of the fact that there is a new narrative that's needed, and what that really brings up. And we've been talking so much about the need to tell stories and share stories. And Anne, I'm coming back to your point about the director of development who said, no, that person's $2.63 is the most important $200.63 in her life. That we tell ourselves, we perpetuate the stories that we tell ourselves. And there are different narratives of what has really been going on in terms of building relationship. And there's just as many of those stories that create success for everybody and feel awesome. And they're not the stories we share. What we share is the group down the street raised $75,000 by doing a golf tournament because they asked all their friends for money. Or, you know, and that's, we're telling stories about money. And if we told stories about relationship and you know, my favorite story, again, coming back to friend raising, I don't know why that keeps coming up today, but my favorite story was the person who, when the book first came out, they bought, they got a copy of the book, they read it, and they immediately bought 12 copies, one for every member of their board. And about 6 months later, I got hold of them and I said, you know, I'm curious what you did, why you did that, and what happened. And she said that she did it because she had come on to as the president of basically a sinking ship. The organization was about to go out of business, and she had, because she was a fundraiser, they said, please step in and be the chair of the board. You're the only thing that could save us. But on the other hand, the board members had all adamantly said, we will not raise money. And so she saw friend raising at the exact right moment, where she handed them all a copy and said, go out and tell the story of this organization. Just connect with people for the only purpose of connecting with, how do they connect with this organization? And I said, okay, it's been 6 months, what happened? She said, oh, we're fine. We're totally out of the dark and we're thriving. I said, it's been only 6 months. This is, you know, well, how did this happen? She said, when we just started connecting with people, the money took care of itself. And that phrase, the money took care of itself, I think there is a huge, I love the idea, Sergio, of the change of narrative, the change of language, and telling the story that we're focusing on the wrong thing. Just as you said, Anne, we're focusing on the thing and not the people. But I think that's a big part of the stories we're telling ourselves rather than the reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're still muted. I'll unmute you. There you go.
Sorry. I was thinking about this writer. I think his name is Stuart Chase, and it's a really interesting book. It's the Tyranny of Words, and he talks. The word is not the thing, and the map is not the territory. I find a challenge communicating with people, understanding the difference in between reality and the word that represents. I mean, I see even on our, you know, in all ages, I see cognitive challenges and the differentiation of those two. I mean, just learning to understand the universe we live in is so complicated. I mean, I appreciate sharing. You guys are all like learning from it, because I listen to how you're all broaching the topic, and we're all explorers together looking at this world, and one doesn't feel as lonely. I appreciate it. So yeah, I think with the connecting, I've done a lot of marketing, and really ultimately marketing turns out for me to be creating relationships of value. And I think and that's what I like about the definition and the catalytic thinking is, well, what type of relationship we want? We want a quality relationship when they think about us and there's a smile and we understand and we can empower them because we can create synergy with what they want to do. I had an interview for a project and the guy didn't even look at my stuff. I'm like, oh my God, how can you even, why would you even want to talk to somebody that you haven't even looked at their stuff? Man, how do you even know what they're good for? And what do you do? You're just going to fit me in some square so I can row all day long? It's like, it's just like business has gotten horrible. I mean, from the humanistic standpoint and the valuation, I agree with you. I agree with everything you're saying as far as how our interrelationships in the businesses and our organizations. I turned a few companies after the .com, and I've worked with several organizations in crisis, and it's like the whole family. It affects everybody because it's a typical situation.
I'd like to add, as we're talking about the language and communication, that we really should be looking at communication, I'm using the word should, that my sense is that the best way to go about communication is to think about it as a way to bring about and let's say authentic community engagement. And what is that going to mean? What is it going to mean to be extremely inclusive of a broad spectrum of people? And what is that work going to be? Because in my mind, building communities takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And I think thinking as to that is what we're after, is to build that community in service of a movement. Then you think about, who are you going to invite to this table? And, are you going to provide opportunities for people to be engaged from the beginning in this relationship? And what are those opportunities going to be? At what point are they going to be meaningful to whom? Again, back to the word fulfilling. What kind of an opportunity would be fulfilling to them? So I think we have to really think about the bigger movement, building community in service of that, and then what are the communications that we are going to have within that, that arena.
That also makes me think about what Anne brought up near the beginning when she said, don't discount the what, I don't remember what they're called, but the head director of donors.
Development.
Yeah, development. So that makes me think about, I know a minute ago I was like, it's a radical act, but at the same time, we want to invite to say we respect your experience and we want to learn from you because you are worth learning from. And so we're not rejecting your experience out of hand because you were, involved in a standard nonprofit kind of career. But so how do we balance that of saying we value all you already have done, and we value you even more because we see you want to keep going and change and learn and participate. So how do we balance that?
And what does it say about our society that to do our work in a way that is in service to the humanity inside those humans in those titles is in fact a radical act?
Yes, it is. I think that it's really important to focus on both that and what you're saying, Laura, ties to the what you've mentioned earlier, Hildy, the need for a new narrative, because some of the people who are going to be the best at helping us change that narrative are going to be the people who are caught and in fact trapped in the old narratives. So because nobody becomes a development director, a real development director, without having come from an area of passion at some point.
Of course.
So.
Of course. But I think it also, the thought of partnering also, in the traditional sense, as we're sort of asking the questions of, hey, what does this raise for us traditionally? puts people into buckets. What are the types of people? Okay, so there's foundations, not humans who work at a foundation, but there's foundations. There's social investors, there's banks, there's donors. It's changing the narrative. What you're making me think about, Anne, is that changing the narrative allows us to really look at partnering based on what people are passionate about and have skills in and connections to, and where they want to play. That it doesn't have to be in the bucket.
Yeah. It's taking our label off of them. It's taking our label off of them as to what they are. Recently, there was there's an effort being made by several large hospitals and other organizations to basically create their own drug company, where they're going to manufacture generic medications. And they're not saying which ones, but this is in sort of response to a lot of the craziness that's been going on, and the greed and the whatever, however you want to label that. But what I found interesting is the people who are sitting on the board. They're not the people you would think would be gung-ho for this. I mean, they came off of other corporate boards, and they are, they are people who see this as something they want to do. So if I was to label them as, oh, you said on a corporate board, yeah, I don't want you on this because I'm labeling you as something, as opposed to where is your passion? What do you want for the world? What is your humanity? So clearly it's our labels on others that can make them what they are.
Do you think the context in which they operate might also be a part of that? I mean, I know that I know a few very conservative attorneys in this community who are absolutely radical when they sit on theater boards. And it gives them the opportunity to be humane in a way that they can't be anywhere in their business life. And they love it, and they do make decisions that they would never think of making in the business world.
A lot of people join boards because they feel trapped in their lives. I shouldn't say join boards. A lot of people get involved in community work in a variety of different ways, because they're in, they've gotten to where they've gotten, and whether they're wrapped in golden chains and can't leave because they've got the golden handcuffs, or for whatever reason, that the place they're free is when they're working at the theater. Mm-hmm. The place they're free is when they're working at the animal shelter. What does it take to build partnerships where everybody feels great?
In thinking about the labeling that we do, or we get slotted in so much of working here, on the ground in community has been really having deep conversations with people of what happens when we start looking at each other with one label, and that is fellow community member. And that has shifted so many things in the conversations, because people do come as their whole human. They may have resources with an organization they're affiliated in, if they don't have to lead out with that calling card. And that's the same thing as the table tent cards at any community meeting, putting job titles in organizations. That's the way we're told to show up. Where are the tent cards? Where are the tent cards with everyone's titles? Is like, if somebody who's like the support person at that meeting, the printer has a jam, that's like a huge problem to not have the titles of people at the table. And what happens if we have that slow down time to get to know the whole human is then the labels just kind of go to the wayside. We're not leading out with what I've been slotted into by the organization's job title.
I'm struck by the language and story and questions. And I'm concerned that we don't have Laura. So I don't know if that's intentional that she's off the screen or not, but Dimitri, could you text her maybe, or see, Rebecca, if you've got her number, could you text her? Thank you. I've been circling in different colors. Those of you who are used to my notes, there's always a million colors. If we were to look at different language, the words I'm hearing are inviting, fulfilling, authentic, engagement, communication, relationship, courage, open, two-way. What other language substitutes for the low-hanging fruit language?
I was actually thinking, Hildy, of the story of stone soup, right? Which is a story you love to tell, and I love that story. And I was thinking, so what would it take for those people to come out and to actually bring something that they will throw in the soup pot, mm-hmm. right? So obviously there is courage. You have to have courage to come out of your house. You have to be curious. What's going on out there, right? What's happening? What's everybody doing? You have to have something that you feel you can contribute to this, whatever that is, an onion, a carrot, right? You have to then come in and feel a sense of fellowship. You're doing something that others are doing, right? So we're in this together. You have to be anticipating something good at the end of it, right? The smell, the aroma is getting to you and you're thinking, ooh, yum, this is gonna be good. And then that sharing, the continuous sharing, of the soup, or even that aroma. You can stand and go, ooh, doesn't that smell great? Yeah.
I was thinking that there's the anticipating something good while you're doing it. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's all of those things, and those are all human emotions. And human emotions is how we tell stories, is by connecting to people with those emotions, by bringing up those emotions in people.
There's one more thing you have to have.
Yes, Anne.
You have to be hungry.
Yes.
And I think that's actually rather a critical word. It's the start.
Yeah.
I have another two thoughts on that, Shiva. I totally agree. Wow. One is safety. That I think there needs to be a degree of that this is a safe thing to do.
There'll be no repercussions.
There'll be no repercussions on doing that. And just another comment on the emotions, which was the first language anyways. I mean, before we had words, we had emotions. And we communicated through those, being able to read the emotions of our fellow travelers in life, our fellow creatures. And I think, is the dog angry or is the dog curious? Am I safe? Am I not? And then, oh, look, I have an onion. So, I can add this to the soup.
And I'm thinking of that sense of I'm contributing to something, that sense of ownership and stewardship, which does not exist in a transaction. If it's relational and we're co-creating, we're on this journey with the soup and I'm proud of it. Not going to let it burn. I'm going to love on it, take turns stirring it, whatever, we can keep going off Shiva's great analogy. It's that sense that this is mine and I am proud to be a part of this with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a sense of wow, look at us. We're creating together. Wow.
Okay, Sergio, you're unmuted. Go.
Yeah, it's just wonderful what Shiva is saying, and Rebecca, and what you yourself, Dimitri. It's a pleasure to chat. It's just giving that connection a new shape. There's a huge abundance there. It's just amazing. The abundance is already there. Scarcity is just the mindset. At least that's what I've discovered so far. We work a project that's connect and create, that's just based on people's abilities and capacities and resources that they have available to empower them. And our largest issue has been success, because in success, there's problems of power and control that people start fighting over things, but just the power of what we're doing for dramatic and systemic and practical change is just huge. But just most of the people, once you get into the velocity of things, there's fear and there's all those components. It's emotional first. I look at, yeah, it's the emotional code is the first code. And then the frontal lobe is trying to, and we're just starting to grasp, and it's really complicated at the heart and contributing to such a fine group of wonderful and inspirational people that you can also add. I've found that it's very hard and complex to understand the concept of adding from a social construct. A lot of they're in the tribal communication of every different tribe different, there's more evolved and less evolved, not only in families, but in our tribal structures, like our cousins, aunts, and all the larger infrastructure. There's code that you can see that just has legacy of hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, just from the gesture time. It's incredible the world we live in, and just being able to share with you is just an inspiration, and you as well, such kind words. Thank you for having me here again.
we are happy to. We're happy to. You know, you're bringing up the whole brain science piece. And I know I keep harping on the language. I'm stuck on the language today. We can create, language is going to be a big piece of creating all the conditions that you talked about, Shiva, of people feeling like they have a safe space that may not require, so Dimitri said a safe space, may not require as much courage if, when I walk into this space, I am routinely treated in a place where I feel, language is going to be a piece of anything we do that uses catalytic thinking to bypass that threat brain and let the frontal lobe do its thing. I think language is going to be a big piece of that. I think the reality of the way the brain works is that the story we're going to remember is when things screw up, when we didn't have money, because that's the way our brains work. And we're going to remember that time that I was poor, that I tried building a relationship, and you know what, he took all my money. That's the stuff, and we're just hardwired for that. And so as we're looking at developing partnerships, acknowledging that, knowing what's going on in people's brains, I think is going to be really important. Knowing that we're hardwired for suspicion, that we're hardwired for scarcity. We're hardwired to ask, yeah, that's all very nice, but how much money do you want? I think that our knowing that, and knowing that we also live in a culture that for thousands of years has reinforced that, it's going to take just design of what does it take to create those conditions so that that doesn't trigger. So that the first thing that triggers is one of the first things you said, Shiva, was curiosity when we first started talking. Okay, what would it take for that to trigger before the fear triggers? Get them first and then have them have to catch up with going, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be afraid.
I think you're talking about trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there are many ways to achieve trust between people. But I like the idea of assuring them that this is not that. As Laura was saying, this is not, we're definitely not this. Because a lot of people need to hear the negative. So what if you said the negative to them in a way that it is positive? So we are not the people who will take your money and run away with it. We are not, and I like that. And it's going to take time to develop trust, although there are cases where trust happens very quickly.
What allowed you guys all to trust creating the future? What was it that, and some of you have known us since before there was a Creating the Future, some of you have known us for just a short time. What is it that that built the trust that you stepped forward and said, I want to play?
I'll start since I'm the old timer. And because it ties to what the word Sergio used, which was code. When I first met Creating the Future, the concepts behind it, the value systems behind it, it had already stepped past and beyond and cut through all code. and there was no barrier there. And I was able to say, yeah, this is authentic. I can stay with this.
I think I agree that was similar to my experience in that I had a few conversations, I mean, within a few conversations. So I had a conversation with Hildy, or first Annette, and then Hildy, and then read the book, and then came to the intensive. And I was having, while the conversations themselves were wildly different topics, whatever, there was a consistency of delivery. It was, I knew that I was going to be asked, very quickly, I knew I was going to be asked, what am I bringing into the room today? And what is my awesome? And it's like instant trust building. Once I knew what to expect, I could then feel comfortable bringing in my full self. And each time I got more and more comfortable. At first, that's quite uncomfortable for me. But then as soon as I realized that, okay, we understand this is this safe framework, so there were going to be no surprises, then it unlocked something in me so that I could participate fully.
I love the consistency piece.
I would add to Laura's, and I would say the integrity piece.
Talk more about that.
Well, there's so many people that you come across in your life where they say something and do completely something else, right? So you learn not to trust people just by their words. You learn to trust people by their actions. And to me, the actions have always matched the words. And so that generates trust. And also, you guys all look trustworthy. And I say that sincerely. I say that sincerely. I know it's, we all go with those impressions. When you look at somebody, what are the impressions you get? What's the body language? Are they looking at you into your eyes? Are they, are they smiling? What is it you're getting from them? And that, for a lot of us, that is where trust starts. This looks like a face I can trust.
Right.
It's the primal language. It's that first language.
I think it's I think back, it's the slow time for the relationship. I still think, and I still have in my files, my very first email from Hildy that was super long and personal and all about connecting as humans. And then I spent an hour with her on the screen. And that's the way, anytime we're in conversation with people. Shiva, I remember when you came forward, whenever this was, and Hildy and I were so excited. I had not even met you yet. And the very next step was, I'm setting up time to spend an hour with Shiva to get to know each other. And back to Laura's, I love the consistency. It's always that way. It's always about the human connection first.
The word that comes to my mind is quality. That there is a quality quality in the relationship versus quantity of the relationship. So I didn't make 75 calls today, I made 3. And I spent the hour with each person. And yes, you do need, we're talking about changing the world here. So we do need more than 3 people to do it. On the other hand, it is what we're, I think that addresses the trust issue to a great degree, is how much do you value me and how much time are you willing to spend with me? Because the time is such a valuable, we don't get time back. So when I spend an hour with you, I am making an investment in you. I see that as important enough for me to do that. So you read that back and say, wow, they spent an hour with me. And you may not say that up front consciously, but subconsciously there is a sense of connection and worth in doing that. So,
Sergio, you're muted again. Dimitri, could you?
I
There
just
we
did.
go.
Like that. There we go. I agree with that totally, and I think we can also address that from a highly conscious state. I talked that with a friend of mine, Alejandro, which is from the neighborhood, and he also cuts my hair. And his father had died, and we met in difficult times, and we were helping each other out. And there was another man, Abel, that had his son got shot and was injured and was pretty much had issues with the family, where he realized the difference in between what everybody's saying and doing are all different things. And he was on fire, and we were sitting there and like, hey, we need to help this guy. Well, we're in trouble now because we're helping each other out. Let's make the space. So it's the consciousness. I think there's an awareness of that situation that we can construct from a healthy standpoint, understanding that, you know, life goes up and down, but it's really about that tribe. And I think that in a world that is so disconnected, I think that this, in a way, this technology is still disconnects, but also is connecting much better. And these exchanges and learning to build together in time and creating the text for that, is complicated. I mean, the tragedy of the commons is a very clear effect on any abundance that connecting creates. And especially at this level of conversation, and Shiva, Anne, and Rebecca, everybody, just the quality of conversation and exchange and of information and coming together and ideas.
There's a couple of thoughts, and I love that story, Sergio, the consciousness that we're helping each other out. I think as we're approaching people from a lens of relationship and partnership, what we were talking about, the exact opposite of so this is what good would look like to when Rebecca was saying it's transactional. The consciousness that we're helping each other out, the redefining of tribe as you know, we are all connected now. Our tribe is global and then potentially otherworldly if Elon Musk's car comes back with somebody in it. So it just, that whole thought, I love the thought of you know, we keep coming back to creating the future as a commons. We keep coming back to that over and over again. Yeah, I think there's something powerful in the reframe from the transactional to the consciousness that we're helping each other out.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say that it also has to do with the vision itself.
Okay, more.
You know, because I am already 95% of the way there, right? Seriously, because that is what I want. That is what everybody here wants, right? So if I'm 95% of the way there, I am willing and open to trust somebody who says, I am with you. And I think this can happen if we're together, right? So that, and I think that comes back to so many things, but that notion that we cannot undermine the true strength of this vision.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's the question of, do I believe in your intentions to get there? And do you believe in my intentions to get there?
Right. Right.
And do we trust each other that we can hold hands and get there?
Yeah. And one thing that we're hearing over and over and over again, I think we even articulated it during the last meeting, is that this work is needed now more than ever. That the tone in the world, I'm going to be a good girl and not say what's in my brain.
I think what you're saying is really powerful, Shiva. I totally agree that the you know, all of the other factors without that don't create the kind of connection that we're talking about here and the kind of power that we're talking about here. You know, otherwise it's, you know, it's a great neighborhood that people help each other, you know, and there's much to be said for that. That's great. I want every neighborhood to be like that, but we're also talking about something that transcends even that. And I think it's because of that vision, because of that bigger picture.
And I think that vision is important to continually return to, just the way I'm always going back to Pollyanna principles, because it's the rock, and it's very easy to get very busy making and serving that soup and forget that it came about because we realized we were all hungry and we needed to feed each other. And that is a terribly important thing to keep in front of people, because as soon as you get busy, that's the first thing you forget.
Yeah.
I also think about the importance of reminding each other that we don't know that answer. And like my way is not the only way. And I actually welcome being lovingly challenged, compassionately challenged, and to keep stating that over and over again, almost to remind ourselves out loud to say, oh yeah, I'm here to work with all these other brains and hearts, and I don't know the right way, but together we do. And if we keep saying that, more people will know that they can also join in safely.
There is a huge amount of fear tied up in the appearance of confidence in being an expert. And I was talking with somebody the other day, having a Zoom conversation, Rebecca, an hour long, let's get to know each other conversation with one of the people in Creating the Future's consultant community, just getting to know each other. And she was talking about the fact that she said, you know, you've been at this work for decades, and I'm blown away that you could easily, in answer to any question that somebody asks in that group, say, here, look, here's the way it is, and here's the answer. And you don't. And you consistently ask questions. And I said, you know why? And in part, yes, it's because that's who we've become in this practice. But I learned a long time ago that there is a delicious freedom. I felt every bit of my tension go away the first time. Now, I've done this a lot in person, but I had never done it from a stage where I had done a keynote, 300 people. Then I did a workshop afterwards, 50 people in a room, and somebody asked me on the stage, well, what do you do when somebody does blah, 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 blah at a board meeting? And when the words came out of my mouth from a stage, that would be a great question to talk with your board about. I didn't have to have the answer. And the freedom in not having to have the answer. And I share that because, Laura, it's so striking. We're taught that we need to have the answer. And we need, as you said, the reminder that we don't have to have the answer. But there's also a whole hell of a lot of fear wrapped up in the, oh shit, I have to have the answer. And either I may not remember what the answer is, or I may not know what the answer is, or what if I'm wrong? And you know, years and years and years ago, when Dimitri and I were first starting to walk this journey, and first starting to have conversations with people, there was a consultant who told me, if you're about to tell me that the reason my clients are not succeeding is because of what I'm doing, I don't want to hear it. Actually said it. If you're about to tell me that the reason there's no change in the world is because if I'm wrong, I don't want to hear it. I mean, that's what it is to be the expert. There is so much fear in that. And I think there's an invitation, you know, how we word it and et cetera, that's down the line. But I think there's really a beautiful invitation in what you're talking about, Laura. Not just reminding ourselves that we don't have to have the answers, but giving people the comfort to say, you don't have the answer either. Guess what? Nobody does. There's something powerful there.
It's Keats. It's Keats, negative capability. That's what he said, the ability to live with ambiguity and happily.
You know, I will add to that, this is where the power of the vision comes in. Because vision doesn't mean answer, it means outcome. It means, you know, what you want the world to be like, or how you envision the world to be. It doesn't mean how you get, it doesn't tell you how you get there.
You're talking about the difference between being and doing.
Yes.
Vision is about the being.
Yes. And I think that that is a really, really powerful key to much of what we've been talking about today, going back to what you were saying, Shiva, is that having that gives you the freedom to say, well, I don't know, let's all work together to figure it out, as opposed to this is the way to do it. One of my favorite go-to stories of accomplishing the perceived impossible has always been the moonshot. When Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon in 10 years, millions of engineers said, it's not possible. You can't do that. They were looking at the how, not the vision. And when they all worked together, lo and behold, they did it earlier than 10 years that they were able to accomplish it. And I realize it's a very mechanistic doing kind of thing, but I think it applies in many, many other realms. That it is that, well, I don't know, Kennedy did say, we're going to do it by having, 6 14-stage rockets that have X number of thrust and whatever, and you're going to build it by Tuesday. No, I'd like to accomplish this.
Yeah.
And I think part of the, one of the great things about this work, and something I would want to figure out how to continually bring back, is to give people the opportunity to practice and be told that, oh, you're heading into doing land, Laura, you're telling, you're not asking a question, and so that kind of, we get more and more experienced in doing that, as you all have, Hildy, you've been doing this for 20 years of asking questions, and that is your way of being now. And so how do we compassionately and kindly say, you went off down that path. And so that would be something I would want to embody in the work too, is that so that I don't have to be afraid of trying in front of a group of people that I don't know. Because I know, and I know this now from experience, Hildy's going to say, oh, that's so interesting. Now let's think about this. And by asking the question, you kind of pop me back onto the path. So that's, I don't know how to capture it yet, but you all will.
Well, and what that brings up is, and it comes back to the community piece, is who's in partnership with whom? And what does that mean? And what do you become part of? And so there's, and I don't have it fully formed right now, but we're all guiding each other. We're all reminding each other. The number of times that Rebecca and I are in a conversation, because I'm not always goodness and light, because that's not life. And the number of times Rebecca will say, we have a framework for that. And it's like, oh yeah, look at that.
That's what I've been thinking about. That is our framework, and speaking to consistency and speaking to rhythms and speaking to how people be together. Look, I think Hildy had met Sergio before. We've all heard about Sergio. This is an example in action of how it will be with whomever we're having conversations with, because everything's guided by the frameworks. We don't have to ask, what should we do, or what? So there's even great effectiveness and smoothness and confidence, because the more time you spend in the framework, the more you're like, I trust the process and I do trust the room. It will not steer us wrong. It does, and it will gently lift us. Laura, to your point, when we're down in the weeds, someone can say, hey, let's lift this up a little. I'm like, oh gosh, thanks. That's why it felt so yucky, because we were in the molasses of the what and how. Yet it's said with such compassion, guiding us back to the questions. So I think it's what's happening right here in this meeting. Would be no different than any conversation we go set forth with someone we want to be in relationship with.
What we do and how we
Sergio's talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Unmute. There we go.
All right, Sergio.
I just wanted to chime in there on what Rebecca was talking about, and Laura. Laura, first from a work environment. Oh my God, yeah, it's the only thing. Once we give people a space where we can nurture their talent and they grow, I mean, it's just incredible what happens. I mean, it needs a space. In general, you're just getting blocked, and ego is a huge problem. Narcissistic environment, and just the risk, and a whole bunch of other factors. And as far as the model, how things are implementing right now, I can see it taking shape. Perhaps there's some more from modeling it and fortifying it, to automate it, to increase the velocity of people. But how you connect is really interesting, and the communication strategy as far as the TED Talk and all that time, and the ability to maintain over time, and innovation. I think that everything's like right, and basically all the information from Hildy has been very, very operative, and that's one thing that's very important for me. Loving and caring, but also being able to execute well. And she always delivers, and she comes through, and she always executes. And for me, it's been just a wonderful relationship and inspiration to you all. I mean, I mentioned it a few times. I know I'll throttle back, but it's been a while wanting to meet you all. And also give back. So the idea is also from the organization. I've got a couple of ideas that I identified in the group. The community that's forming on Facebook is wonderful. It's just one of the best communities I've seen as far as professionally assisting other people, and everybody understanding the complexities of working with individuals and egos and all that, and the money part. So I really find a huge learning space. There's two little projects there that are really interesting that we could probably co-work and do something, so people can see us executing. I like to connect. I like a really good communication strategy. We're actually doing something, and we can get people on board and maybe set up a little team for this and this and that. And then I've got a couple of deals that I'm working on that I structure. I primarily use a Kaizen methodology for continuous innovation. And I use different linguistic models, and we can also definitely include catalytic thinking, because the underlying factor of asking the right questions and identifying what the other person wants is being able to align yourself with a valuable relationship. You can't if you don't know. So these are all key factors to a larger construct that we can execute. And I think that would be a really, like a small scale, one or two things. And we can also probably seek to the monetization there and offer practical products for organizations that find value in what we're doing, and is also an economic value, because quality communication is just a whole different planet.
Yeah, it's I'm noting, because it is something that that everybody has talked about and somehow has not come up today, which is the practical nature of it. Rebecca's acronym for "this shit works and it works everywhere," but it's the practical, the pragmatic, I loved the executing. What I'm smiling internally at, because why we keep coming back to the same in every conversation we have. Nancy always tells me, every conversation at Creating the Future is every other conversation at Creating the Future. It's like, why don't we just have one conversation and say we're done? It is, it's like what I was mentioning before with Laura, when you and I were having a conversation, I want to get more involved. Sergio and I had the same conversation. I want to get more involved. And I said, I don't know, hang out for a while and see what interests you. And it's not the checklist of, oh, good, you can do coding. Here's what we need. And suddenly what I'm sitting here and I'm thinking is, why is it different when we're looking for partners for anything? If what we're looking for is partners to play with us, to be in authentic conversation and relationship around shared vision, and where we're sharing in a realm of stone soup, if our norm is bringing people into community and having these conversations, then, you know, that's what we do. we have the conversations, we have the one-on-one conversation, like I did with Sergio, like I did with Laura, like Rebecca had with Shiva. And it's like, oh, this is where you want to play? That's great, let's play. And here's what you can bring to the table, and here's what we bring, and what do we have together? And the thought that's just suddenly occurring to me is, because we make such a big deal, and I'm going to use the word nonprofit rather than community benefit, because it is a nonprofit scarcity place. Because in the nonprofit world, we make such a big deal out of raising money. Because in the business world, we make such a big deal out of generating revenues, and we have made money the god. We have been asking ourselves, this group, a question about sleuthing partners in the work that we're doing. It's not a separate thing. It's just who we are. And yeah, I'm probably not being very articulate about it. It's just this feeling that's washing over me that is like, we just need to be who we are and do what we do and invite people to the conversation.
That's the difference, is the invitation. It's just that we're just saying, we've been playing with a lot of people that came to us, and we love them, and we want to play with anyone who comes to us, but we'd also like to be sure that a lot of people who don't know about us do, so that we can invite them to play with us.
Well, and I think that's what, to build on that, that's also what I understood. I heard Sergio saying is, okay, we've got this great stuff. Now we've got the technology to support expanding the thought, because as you've said, Hildy, it takes a damn long time to develop that one-on-one relationship. So how can we ramp it up so that it can be done? Not that we want to change the quality, but we want more people to be doing those one-on-one relationship building things faster. And so how can we get more people more comfortable faster to be out there practicing, even while they're making the relationships with potential partners? They may have only had the very briefest of toe dipping into the framework, and how fast can we spin them out into the world and say, okay, go, and then come back and tell us how it went. So it's like, I can't remember what the word is, but when you're multiplying the factors more quickly.
It's exponential. Yeah. We're creating the ripples in the relationships. If the goal is to create the ripples in the relationships, and the money will take care of itself.
So my brain is stuck at that stone story. I'm so sorry. I keep going back to that, and I'm trying to sort of figure out where creating the future is in that story, right? So I think that you have started a small fire, right? And I think that you're starting to tell the story of how delicious the soup is going to be, right? Just you wait, it's going to be so delicious. So the question is, in my mind, at what point is the fire even big enough to say, now we're going to put a pot on top of it, right? And at what point do you say, okay, now it's worth us going to the river and getting the water and getting the rocks and bringing them in and putting them in? So in your sense, because I'm new to this, in your sense, where is creating the future in that story?
In terms of, I'm not entirely sure how to answer.
Hold on a second, Sergio.
Go ahead.
Okay, go.
Shiva, were you talking about scaling the organization?
Well, in some ways, it is the idea of scaling. But I think in other ways, it's the idea of, are you even at the tipping point?
I got to tell you, I think there's still more work for me to there's still more analysis to do as to where the organization is at. I think the fire is there. I mean, the core message is there. I think that planning the next steps are fundamental for an organization of this nature, because you got to keep that fire alive. So, and I think how we show a smart growth initiative and strategy over the next year also shows our capacity to execute well, and are also other elements that bring people together. I mean, in the far as value, how you execute online, how your technology is. So I agree wholeheartedly with Shiva there. Looking forward is, and that's one of the reasons I was mentioning the practical projects. I've done some work in organizations in this stage. And one of the things is that if we bring too many people on board, we need to understand that the mechanics and the value and the trust, it gets a little bit more complicated. And also organizing certain projects that will help us to agglomerate the people that come in, and we don't lose them, because then if not, they become dispersed. So, and to answer the question, just to throw out a framework of thought that we can modify, but just from being here, is that I see the fire is there, but really just got to be careful. The next step is how much we want to grow and how but ultimately, without losing the fact that it's about that relationship. No, not lose the essence of what we're doing, but be able to scale and grow with what Hildy has been commenting. And I see how the structure is coming along. And I did a little research with different groups and how they grew here in Argentina with the Cartoneros and people with disabilities, and also the Zeitgeist movement, which was really interested in how it connected with a lot of people. And so basically the formation of the group is really important, organizing the roles and the responsibilities, and setting together some practical groundwork for people to do and start working together is important. And then once you have that and the process fleshed out, it's really good, it's excellent, and the quality of how we're connecting. And Hildy, when you threw me into the group, I'm like, but that's the way we are in a social culture these days. If you can't float there, it's really complicated. So basically, and the research for understanding what was happening with the group, understanding who was coming, just the quality and the caliber of people, of the quality of execution. I mean, there's a huge future here. It's just amazing what quality of work you've all done. I mean, I'm a fan too. I follow you guys. I'm a prosumer. I've been looking for good messages, just like all of you. I'm scouring people that can sustain a message from one day to the next and has integrity and transparency. And online, everything's documented. There's really nothing to argue about anymore. If you're still arguing, you don't understand. It's all documented. I mean, let's just get along and do some fun stuff together and trust each other and build upon other value set, even in this international village that we have all over the planet now, because the value of the relationship has transformed. I mean, you can travel anywhere and we're still as connected as we're right next to each other. Just the value of being connected and building quality relationships just exploded. Not that it wasn't anything else. And just building, and just the inspiration I get from listening to you all and looking at the work as it comes along and the quality communication. You gotta do it with the heart. It takes heart.
I'm having to translate your question, Sheila, because, and you're not going to be surprised, for me, the question is not about where are we in building the fire. The question is that it's not about the fire, it's about the people who are bringing the matches and the sticks and the pot and the water. And what it feels like, and I could be wrong, I'm just one person. What it feels like is we have a small number of people, each of whom have a carrot, a stick, a bit of water, a pot, and that the goal of growing the ripples and relationships brings you closer to a tipping point, because you've got now 2 carrots and 2 sticks and 2 matches and 2 drops of water. And so it feels very much like we have pieces in place, as in people who have the talents and skills and resources and connections and in a million different walks of life, and that the intention of and you saw this in our strategic objectives for the year, the intention of multiplying that. And so yeah, that's, I don't know that that completely answers your question, but it's sort of what it feels like, where several years ago it did not feel like that. Several years ago, Nancy Iannone has been part of this since the beginning. And we were chatting, just, we do drinks, every once in a while, as in, I wish she was right here because I'd love to do drinks. So we each drink and we toast each other online. And she said the thing that she's excited about right now is that this is not any different than the conversations that we were having about what would it take to build real partnerships in 2010 and 2011 and 2012. She said the difference is we would have those great conversations about what it might look like, not nearly as in depth as what we were just doing here, because we didn't have a year of people having the conversation to get us to this point. She said we would have an initial, and you were in those conversations, we would have a conversation about, we don't want to be transactional. We want to enter into real partnerships. If you look at the history online of my blogging about the meetings we had, Nancy said, and the only difference is, then it would be, okay, Hildy, go do it. And it was go do it, or go run classes, or go do whatever. And she said, the difference now is we have people. And so what I'm feeling in answer to your question is, do we have lots and lots and lots of people? We have more than we think we do. That's the one. And I'm learning that in what I have been doing in terms of inviting people to join us in the beta this week. We have a lot more people than we think we do. There's a lot more people who follow us than we think do. And it's a matter of finding out who they are and do they have a carrot. And so, what is their carrot? What does their carrot look like? Oh, it looks more like an onion. Great. We love onions. But yeah, that's sort of where I'm feeling.
Thank you.
I'd add also,
that's so great. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
I think I'd also add to it, when I think about what we have, is we have years of thinking and planning. So like we have spent many time with like so many different brilliant minds in thinking about what would good look like and what would it take, days of whiteboarding and capturing that and turning it into business plans. So it's not vaporware. And it's also, this is our idea and this is exactly what we want you to participate in. It's our thinking from having a smaller group of people do everything in a very manual way. And, a lot of the knowledge sitting in people's heads and on Post-its. So what does it mean to have systems and checklists and templates and processes, all guided by it being about the people and not the thing? So in support of humans. So when we think about what we've got, I remember when I used to work at IBM and we'd go pitch vaporware, stuff that didn't even exist. I'd have to go do a sales pitch for. It didn't even exist. And I was given some slides and I kind of, it'll be great. Here we have the confidence, because we have invested with so many brilliant minds around the world for years, that this meeting is the culmination of years of meetings of people. So now we're at that point to turn it to action. From the readiness state, we are ready to turn to action. The whole enchilada, certain parts that people want to play with us, that's great, because we're not saying you must sign up and this is what we're serving on the menu today.
Our vision, my vision of what this is, and it's just mine, is it's not one pot. It's millions of pots. And it's showing people how to do this. And it is very much an open source kind of reality. So when you look at open source and you think about, I think we just had the anniversary of Linux, like the 20th year or something like that. Who would have thunk, that 20 years later, this would be powering the internet that powers our world today. And yet it's all done by people whose passions are shared and done primarily for free in terms of that underlying core. And yet there's resources that are devoted toward it. There's people who make living at it. There's people, whatever, but it's this idea that we're sharing it openly and what's going on. So it's hard to, because I've really been thinking about your question. It's hard, Shiva, to think about it in the sense of one fire, one pot, and because it's really many. And what's been happening is, Hildy talks about we have many people now, and Rebecca's talking about we have plans now, we have whatever, but they're not our secret plans, and they're not our secret people. They are open to everyone. And so the ability for this to catalyze very quickly, as did the open source movement catalyze very quickly, is because it isn't proprietary, because it is, and because there's a constant feedback loop. That's the other thing that open source does, is it constantly gets better because the people who are out there get feeding back into it. So I don't know what the exact answer is, but that's the vision that I have.
That is very helpful on all your parts. Thank you. No, that clarifies that in my mind, and also brings a question then to my mind, which is, are we then, if it's many fires, many pots in many parts of the world, are we aware of what each of these pots and fires need?
Here's the thing that's coming to me as we're talking about this. And I want to bring us back to the conversation of partnering. As we are restructuring or structuring Creating the Future as a networked platform for people to do work that's meaningful to them and in ways that supports them in doing that, there is going to be a massaging of what is organization and what is network. And as you're creating a commons-based effort, and yet there is an organization that is seeing itself as a support to that commons-based effort, I'm very wary of who is we. And what does we mean, and what do we have, and what do we do? Are we a machine that does education programs? I could be a for-profit hierarchical company and do that. I could be a sole proprietor consultant and do that. Or are we a support to a network? And what does that mean? And are we ever going to know who all the fires are out there and the people around those fires? Nope. And we have often said that success of this mission, we'll know we're successful when people we've never met are talking to other people we've never met, having conversations we don't know about that are following frameworks and language and stories that bring out the best in other people, that are creating systems change and don't even know that what they're doing came third generation and 20 years later from this thing called Creating the Future. That is what success will look like. And that's what somebody is playing in the playground with if they want to create that. If they want to see change, systems change, and I'll share that so many of the things that we talked about throughout this past couple of hours are things that, while they are frustrating from an organization seeking funding sense, and foundation people hate this shit. They just don't know what else to go to. They hate it. They cannot trust. We have done work as foundations, as representatives of foundations. You can't trust a thing anybody tells you because they're telling it to you because they want your money. So you have absolutely no idea. We've worked very, very closely with very wealthy donors who say the same thing. I can't trust a thing when somebody's coming to me because I know that eventually they just want what's in my pocket. And so what we're talking about in terms of systems change is not just systems change for fundraising. It's really systems change at a blow it up and start over again. What does it look like if you're creating a platform that allows people to succeed and thrive, and somehow resourcing that in a way that everybody is participating? And so it's a different, weirdish sort of answer, and I probably wasn't very articulate about it, but it's really striking me that that's, yeah. Anne, I see you smiling.
I'm just thinking of Laura earlier today. It's a radical action. That's what it is. And it is going to lead us to, I mean, the pitfall that I've looked at as Shiva was speaking earlier was, how do we know what they're saying over those pots of water and those separate fires and those different onions? Are they really doing the framework right? And
are they model compliant?
Exactly. And that's a real trap, but we have to, I mean, it's got to be embraced.
Which really, really, really comes back, Anne, to the who's the we.
Yeah.
Who are we? Is it we, the inner circle, who are doing this thing for you? Damn well better be grateful. Or is it this huge, large we, and redefining, it is what Laura said earlier, a radical act. Redefining what it's getting back to the question of what actually creates social advancement, what really creates social progress, what really creates social change. It's not an organization. It's not an organization and how they raise money. It is how we be with each other and the assumptions we make about how we be with each other and the systems that we create for that. There's something really powerful, and yet it is, as you quoted Keats, it is stepping into an unknown. It is embracing and living in that space until that becomes the known, until this is how we be with each other.
It's also what Dimitri was saying about the vision, and that's, I think, the thing that sustains the negative capability, is that if you have the vision and you share the vision and you know that the people who have the other pots share that vision, they will come to it the way they do, provided the framework has been strong enough for them, and they'll make mistakes because we will too.
Because we're human, and I mean, she was the one who said earlier that this is around the vision or it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we won't know its application. I mean, we won't know, as you were saying, Hildy, every instance of this happening, and that's okay.
We already don't.
We already don't know it. I look back and I smile at this. I remember the exact moment when Hildy did a workshop and she wrote, nonprofits and put a big no through it. And then she said, community benefit organizations, that's what we are. And she did the whole thing about, what nobody says what they're not. I'm not green, I'm not 700 pounds. They say what they are. And so say what you are, say you're a community benefit organization. Okay, that was many years ago. And I don't know that Hildy was the first or the only one that said this. But now, we're looking at college programs, departments and universities that have changed their language to say that, to say community benefit organizations, to say community benefit. And the two aren't connected in any way. I mean, one happened way over here and the other is happening way over there. So there was a chain of causality around that allowed a shift to start happening, and maybe in a very small way, but yet it's happening in that particular case in an educational institution that impacts all kinds of other people. So it's just interesting to me. One last comment on the Linux example. Linux has an organization that maintains standards and values. And so you can be a Red Hat, or you can be, run down the list of all the different companies that use Linux to create products and do whatever. If you want to be part of this, you need to A, share it back, and B, comply with certain base standards. Otherwise, you're not that. And so that's sort of what guides it is, though, and in essence, in their case, that's what their values are.
Yeah.
So getting back to a more pragmatic way of looking at this, at least in my mind, do we look for people with not exactly the same vision, but similar vision, or visions that are in some ways along the same lines, wanting the best, wanting a kind, compassionate society, wanting the, do we look for that as we look for potential partners?
I'm going to answer
one of our points of search.
I'm going to answer with a picture. So give me a moment to get this picture because my machine had crashed. Come on, are you there? Here we go. And the answer is, we're not there yet. The answer to how and who and what is in the green and the actions here. The answer to who do we talk to and who do we look for and blah, blah, blah. We're not anywhere close there yet. What we have been doing today, and it really is the perfect wrap up, Shima, so thank you for putting us back in the context of the framework. What we've been talking about today really is deeply listening to what is the situation. Because so often we go into the presenting situation, we just answer the question. We're gonna be sleuthing. Well, we need to know who, and we need to know what to say, and that's where we generally go, without really deeply listening to what is the situation. And I think we have done a beautiful job today of really describing what is the situation. And I'm really looking forward to now wrapping up and talking about this through the lens of catalytic listening to review back and say, what are the outcomes that you saw as you review your notes, doing our reflection through the lens of catalytic listening. From there, next time, we will start reaching for those outcomes because we already have listed them today. We listed all of the outcomes today. From there, we'll start asking the conditions questions. Okay, what do people need to know and feel? What do they need to believe? Some of what will come out of that eventually when we look at our own internal conditions for success are going to be, what do we need to know in order to be successful? What do we need to know in order to know if they believe that? So if they need to believe, and it gets right to your question of your question of shared values and to what extent is a condition. It's a condition question. What do they need to believe in order to be a really wonderful partner for everything that we've been talking about today? What do they need to feel? What do they need to value? The very practical question of, and how will we know? What will it take for us to know that? What are the conditions? So again, what we have done today is really a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job of that very, very first step of understanding the presenting situation. And just as an object lesson to anybody who may be watching who is not steeped in catalytic thinking, going down the how rabbit hole happens about 1,700 times in any conversation anywhere. So I'm just grateful that you happen to bring it up, Shiva, but we all do it all the time. And we all go, oh yeah, that was a how thing, or that's a doing thing. And let's set that aside. And let's, which comes back to Laura, your point about being in community so that we can gently say, oh yeah, okay, this is where this, because we work in our brains. We've each been trained in how many decades of thinking the way we think. Even if you're 20, you got 20 years of it.
Mm-hmm. And a ton of societal reinforcement in that.
Exactly. So what we really have done today is again looking at the presenting situation rather than making assumptions that we all know what each other's thinking. Rather than making assumptions that, oh yeah, we're talking about raising money, or no, we're talking about building relationships, or no, we're talking about building community, and all of us getting into a room together, and that happens when you're not speaking the same language. we have a really good, solid understanding now of what that presenting situation really is. And now what I'm going to ask you guys is to take some time now and reflect. I wish Sergio was here. He clearly either lost bandwidth or lost battery.
Lost battery, probably.
I'm going to guess. And Sergio, as you're listening to the end of this, we would love to have your reflections. Anyone who is watching this, please take your reflections and post them in the comments at the blog. So take a deep breath. We have covered a ton of ground in some really, really beautiful conversation today. I love the fact that it kept moving from what we hated to what was possible, just very naturally. And so what I'll ask you guys is to look over your notes and let's do our reflection through the lens of catalytic listening. And I'll be asking about outcomes and strengths and values. But just take a moment and look through your notes. And on a separate piece of paper, jot down the things that stood out for you, the ahas, the things that you want to circle. I know I'm in trouble because I have way more that I circled than I didn't. Can you hear us, Sergio?
I think Sergio's on his phone now.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Sergio? Do you hear us? As Sergio comes back in, we will. Dimitri, would you post in the chat or Rebecca, would you post in the chat to Sergio that we're in reflection and what the questions were, just what's standing out. So as you look over everything, and I know this is a big one to do this for. Mm-hmm. What would good look like? What are the outcomes that strike you from our conversation today? What are the outcomes that it looks like we are looking for? And I'm going to start with creating relationships as a radical act. Just so beautiful. What other outcomes? What does good look like?
I had along those lines, more people in deep relationship with each other, where you can have both love and compassion and accomplish a ton, because that's how we are at creating the future. It's not if we do that relationship stuff, nothing gets done. It's more people will be delighting in that reality.
Because we have relationship that
yeah. So we are being the world we want to see. More people are.
I think partners in vision sharing was one thing that stood out for me. The incentive is the vision.
What other outcomes struck you guys?
I feel like I feel closer to having let's see. To me, the framework, just the fact that this meeting was modeled on the framework and we got to this place, and thinking kind of what Sergio was talking about is like, what is I don't know that product is the right word, but what is the thing we are offering? What is, to me, the outcome of this is that the framework is the gift that we have to share with the world. And it's a way to easily come back to beginner's mind in a replicable way. So all of, work I do with meditation and yoga and reminding myself to always remind myself, like the framework is the way to do that. And having that be, it's kind of an easy thing to hand to someone, like show them that chart and say, here, do this, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then come back and teach me what you learned. And so I think we're closer.
Wow.
There's one other thing, and something that Dimitri said, I think, was that when we do the classes, each class is different because you are participating in the class. So, and I think that becomes sort of a generic, that every group is different because of who is participating in it. It changes, and so it becomes a unique element of its own. And we are open to that.
Yeah. What other outcomes struck you of what we are hoping this process, this way of being, will accomplish, the difference it'll make?
I like the notion of inviting people to join this community. The community that's deeply seeped in this framework, where each and every person is valued. And that is part of our value, that we value everyone.
I was playing with the radical notion idea. And the thought that went through my mind in terms of an outcome is something that's radical is not, the words that come to my mind is against the norm. I don't know if that's the right language, but just to convey that it's something that's not in the mainstream. And yet the notion of stone soup is very much in who we are. And so both of those are melded in that it is in some senses a radical notion of engaging people. And on the other, engaging people is we are social creatures that only exist on this planet in civilization because we stone soup ourselves all the time. You know, we cooperate, we work together, we work for common outcome and common good. And so it is the making that not a radical notion. Because I agree with you, Laura, it is a radical notion. But it becoming the norm is making it what it really is, which is very human, very normal, very enriching.
The one of the outcomes that struck me, and Shiva, I'm so grateful for you bringing back and hammering home the stone soup metaphor, because it really, and the question that you asked that stopped me, that I couldn't get my arms around. We're so used to the story of stone soup being about the stuff that's in the pot and not the people who brought the stuff. And what we're talking about is that the outcome is the people around the pot, is the community, is the language that your whole question about, people can stay in their houses or they can be in community. They got to come out of their house to put the carrot in the pot. It's about, I'm loving that notion that what we're creating is the community of people who put stuff into the pot, not the stuff that's in the pot. It's really powerful for me right now. What values did you guys hear in what we were talking about?
People feeling that when we say it's always about the people and never about the thing, we value that feeling that you get when you're in relationship with someone. And that's our norm. That's how we always be.
Yeah. Trust and safety and integrity, consistency, all four of those words were outstanding.
And walking the talk of that, because I'm so often reminded of the code of values on the wall at Enron, which was respect, integrity, and honesty, and actually walking the talk of our values. I especially loved the conversation about the consistency. What else did you guys hear as values?
Curiosity, the constantly asking, tell me more, and meaning it.
I would key off of the last thing you just said, the meaning it part, Laura, in that asking the question, meaning it, and wanting to incorporate your curiosity into what, learning from your curiosity.
Yeah, there's one of the things that I heard in this meeting, and I hear in every Creating the Future meeting, not stated, but in action, is building wisdom upon wisdom, strength upon strength. Every comment each of us made built upon the comment before and the comments before and 3 comments back because we were thinking about it. But there's a value in building upon the wisdom in the room and building wisdom upon wisdom that just it's never openly stated, but it's very, very, very openly there.
And that speaks to what it means to be a catalytic listener, because so often in meetings, someone may just be waiting for their moment to interject. What does it mean to be?
Wait a minute, I have a story to tell.
So we only can build on if we are being fully present with what someone's saying.
What did you say? I wasn't listening. I was thinking about what I was going to say.
I would add the value of being in this together. The value of togetherness, this fellowship.
Fellowship together.
I like the idea of Rebecca to be fully present, to be here, to be able to see each other, namaste, and be able to enjoy the amazing depth of the present and get to know each other and build together.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, that value of being present. And getting back, Rebecca, to you saying that that's what catalytic listening is all about, because we're not present when we're, yes, thank you, Sergio. Yeah. And what strengths did you guys hear that there is to build on?
The vision, for sure.
The framework, the framework is such a strength because that guides us, that gives that comfortable feeling to confidently come into the room. And as I thought more about the framework and what you said, Hildy, earlier about the conversations we're considering with reaching out to people who want to play in the playground, is thinking about our own curiosity about who's sparking our interest out there. Like, what are we seeing and noticing? And we've talked a lot at other meetings about what will we be sensing from them? So it's that same way that we ask as an invitation to get to know people. So I feel like we don't know what it looks like yet, but I feel like this sleuthing plan is actually going to be far simpler than something very complicated. I feel that it's really, what do people need to feel supported, that they can go reach out to be in relationship with someone out of curiosity and exploration.
Well, our own curiosity.
Yeah, ours.
Is a strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the wisdom of knowing that you do not have all the answers.
Liberating feeling that you do not have all the answers.
Laura, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Is there anything that you need to add that you haven't added yet?
Nope, I'm happy.
We're happy you're here.
Bye, Laura.
One of the things that I had noted as a strength is our mandate, our mission to focus on language, to focus on reframing story and reframing language. That because we talked so much about harmful language and the power of good language. The fact that that is not only not foreign to us, but it's where we live.
That speaks to Sergio noted about code. I think of the legacy of language and all the yuck that gets conjured up from so many of the words, and words mean things and they mean very different things to different people. So acknowledging that outright, that you may have a visceral reaction to this word.
Like bringing out the best in people.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. I'm working on it, Anne. I'm working on it.
I know you are. You just don't want to get it tired and worn out before page 42.
I'm working on it. And as well as story, replacing the old story and acknowledging. I think there is something powerful in, and again, this is the framework. Our ability to acknowledge how much of, and Sergio, you even mentioned this straight on, how much of what we believe as fact is the story we've told ourselves. And so the ability to separate out, is that really true? Is that a story we've told ourselves?
It's actually pretty amazing from a mental framework. What I've been thinking about is Terence McKenna's culture is your operating system, and language is the actual code. And it's interesting how different ant communities behave. If the weather is more difficult to survive, you need to be more efficient or less efficient depending on where you're evolving at that point in time, and the external and the internal conditions. All those pots. I think it's the one-on-one and understanding that and being able to articulate in a positive framework, understand what's going on and work together and resolve together.
Yeah. Yeah. Other strengths that you guys noted?
Authenticity. The power of that.
Yep. And I had right next to authenticity, I had, there was a string of conversation where I was just circling words. Authentic communication and engagement, authentic inclusivity. Because these days there's a whole ton of bullshit inclusivity. Invitation, the power of invitation, which is both a value, an outcome, and a strength. Those things, and I love, Sheila, the word fellowship. There's something rich in that, although it's rather patriarchal. So we'll have to find a substitute.
I find that most of the language that I respond to in a positive way is a language that's seeped with humility and compassion.
Yeah.
And I don't respond well with people who think they have all the answers and know it all and have not had experiences themselves where where they have learned humility. So I respond to that. I don't know if that talking about or it's just a side thing I'm throwing in. But I think as we go to change the language into what's more inclusive and more embracing, keeping humility and compassion in mind is a great North Star.
Well, it's going to be language and story, but language absolutely that mindfully bypasses the threat mechanism. And so if something is mindfully bypassing the threat mechanism, it's going to be speaking of compassion, et cetera. Sergio, if you will, if you're out of battery, we hope that you will add any additional reflections into the comments at the blog. And we're so grateful that you were here. Thank you. Thank you. Any other reflections before we, anything that just stood out to you that you're feeling as you leave? And next time we're going to start diving into these outcomes and what it takes to.
When is next time?
Oh, such a mundane question.
I know.
Such a pragmatic question.
I know. I can't help it.
I have no clue. I think we had talked about maybe every other Wednesday, but I didn't put it in my calendar, so I can't really tell you if that's true.
Right. Well, I have confidence that you'll let me know.
I have confidence that we'll figure it out.
I have one comment, or I have a
yes,
comment.
Please.
And that is the power of reach of this, what we're doing, that a man who is obviously bright and interested and inquisitive on the other side of the planet sits in this meeting with us and contributes fully and warmly and feels all of the things we talked about, authentically engaged, welcomed, the language, just in terms of thinking of what this process does and how there is reach. It's already out there. And it was just wonderful to have such a a visceral example of that. And so thank you if you get to watch this closing, Sergio. Thank you for joining us. This was a wonderful example of so many different things on this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have any final, how are you guys feeling about what we did today?
I'm looking forward to reframing the entire conversation.
Right?
The narrative of fundraising just went up in flames, and I love it.
Yes.
Mission accomplished.
I know. I know. Well, Radical Act is actually, you guys probably don't know this, but Radical Act is Ann Vermel's middle name.
I thought it was Grandiosity last week, but I changed it. Right?
You changed it, you know. We'll be flexible. Shiva, Rebecca, any feelings before we leave, before we depart?
I'm noting, as always, for us who are in these meetings all the time, it's the end of 3 hours, and I'm feeling elated, I'm feeling energized, and I'm feeling even more deeply connected to people I already adore, because you can have love, compassion, and accomplish a ton together.
And I'm feeling very engaged, curious what we can all come up with, and just looking forward to seeing you guys again in this room or anywhere.
I know.
Oh, good.
I know.
Yeah, ditto on that, Shiva.
Yep. I am feeling, I'm feeling how powerful it is when we take the time to listen and ask the questions and dig into. So tell me what you're really thinking about when you say that. And okay, I get what you said, but what is that? And there's something delicious in that and the knowing that at every point along the way, as we get further into different questions, that we're going to keep coming back and going, okay, I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, that's another value, or that's another outcome, and the iterative nature of it. So, but it feels just great to listen like that. So thank you guys, and thank you to Laura and to Sergio and to anybody who is watching. And seriously, put your reflections in the comments at the blog, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.